Hey there, Hoka athlete and higher running coach Sage CANADAY here with another Training Talk Tuesday or Thursday. Thanks for all your questions. I'm gonna do a different one this week, but submit your questions below and vote up. We want the overwhelming votes for topics for next week in your Training Talk. And check out my library. I've been doing this for 12 years, over 12 years here on the YouTube Training Talks. Called them Training Talk Tuesdays more recently, but yeah, dive right in. We're gonna talk about aerobic-based development. Mileage, basically, volume, how many miles or kilometers you run in a week. And it changes, as you get older, it changes if you get injured, it changes maybe as you mature as a runner in age, but also of what distance you're training for. Maybe you're training for a 5K or a ultra marathon, right? So it does change, but the general principle, and this goes back to all the videos I've done on aerobic base building over the last decade plus. I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, is that the saying? Repeating myself over and over, but aerobic base development is really key, and it's nothing new. It's nothing new. I hate how, there's new programs, new coaches, they keep repackaging the same thing. Basically that Arthur Lydiard set back decades and decades ago. Like you go back to the 1960s is when this training periodization, or how your training changes over time, and building an aerobic base with high, low intensity volume was revolutionary back then, decades and decades ago, right? It's not a new moth method or a new zone training thing or a new low heart rate training. This has already been tried and true for decades. And there's actually hasn't been a ton of innovation really, I'd say, in the sport of distance running outside of probably carbon fiber and shoes and special foams is probably the biggest disruptor that I've seen over the decades, because the training methods don't change. You have to work hard, you have to be consistent, and you got to stay healthy. And if you do those things, you're probably going to progress as a distance runner, especially if you're just started out, you've only been running for the last couple years or the last 5 or 10 years. When you're someone like me who's maybe not the typical person watching this video, I started running pretty high mileage at a pretty young age, ran all throughout school, and I'll use one of my examples actually of how the mileage base, the high mileage, actually helped improve my speed at distances as short as 1,500 meters, or about the mile. 1,500 meters, 1,609 meters is a mile, but I was more of a 10K runner in college already, 10K to marathon, but I was running really high mileage. And the mileage gives you strength. It gives you a lot of strength because if you go from running 30 miles a week, 50K per week, and you eventually get up to almost doubling that, let's say you get up to 60 miles a week, 100K a week, consistently, that's a really good level for a lot of people. That's the kind of level where people say, okay, maybe I could qualify for Boston, maybe I could crack 3 hours in the marathon. Not everyone can. There is a genetic component, there's a lifestyle component, but generally when you increase your volume that much, you could get big improvements. And that's kind of the whole point of this talk, is that volume is still kind of underrated. People are afraid of mileage, and you don't want to get injured. That's the big thing. But to overtrain yourself, to overtrain the aerobic system is actually pretty hard to do. You could mess up your endocrine system. You could get a skeletal muscular injury, muscle tear, tendonitis, bone break, stress fracture type of thing. Mentally, it could be exhausting if you're losing a lot of sleep. But the main limitation that most people have, at least most people that Coach Sandy and I have trained at Higher Running and sell training plans to and have consulted with, and friends and people in the run clubs and people that we've met when I worked in specialty shoe running stores, the number one thing usually is people just need to run more and they'll get better at distance running. I mean, who would have thought? But like I said, you can't get injured. And so you have to build up smart and you have to build up slowly. And part of that buildup is running slowly, but still running with good form. And that's the whole thing about, people, I'll keep it under zone 2. Moth method, keep your heart rate low. The talk test, can I carry on a conversation? Because if you're running slower and you're building up your mileage, you're less likely to get injured. But eventually, if you're like me, especially, you've run a lot of slow miles over the years, you're going to need some intensity to really reach your potential. And even as a beginner runner, it's good to do speed work and build up that speed efficiency as well and get some of that lactate levels higher, but also boosting VO2 max and things like that. So, the intensity speed does need to be there, but the aerobic base and the mileage really comes first. And it not just helps you at the cellular level, mitochondria, powerhouse of cell, blood flow, capillary bed density, stuff like that, burning fat more effectively as a fuel, but it helps you structurally, like building up your muscle strength, building up those posture muscles, the core, the glutes, the abs, your hip flexors, your calves. The muscle strength is really key to support faster pace running for longer distances and durations. So, you can't get injured, and the limiting factor for most people really is time. Like, you guys are probably really busy. Maybe you work a full-time job, maybe you work overtime, maybe your job is physically demanding, maybe you're not getting enough sleep, you might have a family, you've got little kids running around, a lot of family obligations, maybe you have to take care of an elderly family member, something like that. Maybe there's other stress at work, all sorts of things going on in your life where running has to take the back seat a lot of times, and people don't have enough time to train like a professional sponsored athlete or an Instagram influencer or someone who's maybe extremely wealthy, because that luxury to be able to run 1, 2, 3 hours a day, I realize most people don't have. But if you do have a little bit more time to squeeze in things, you could get a lot of bang for your buck by being consistent over time and having that aerobic base. And, if you have an ambitious goal, like really lowering that marathon time, cracking 3 hours, qualifying for Boston, you're getting kind of close, maybe it's the thing that's going to give you that extra edge. If you're a kid or young adult in high school or college, university, club level, or on the team, building that base for the season, even if you're only racing 5K in distance, 8K in distance, is really key, even for the 1500. And back to my story, I wasn't running super high mileage in high school. I was pretty high mileage. During the school year, I was doing a lot of 30, 40 mile weeks. So, 55, 60 kilometers a week, pretty high intensity track interval sessions, stuff like that. I did get up to 70 miles a week in the summer a bit, but I ran 409 in the 1500 meters. It's about a sub 430 mile, barely. It was above average for sure, but the mile wasn't my event. Now, fast forward 5 years later in college, after I've started running 100 miles a week, 160K a week, I've already run a marathon in college, and doing, mainly 5K, 10K, I jumped into 1500, boom, 10-second PR, or actually more than a 10-second PR, almost a 15-second PR, 14-second PR, ran a 355 1500 off of just more marathon-based training. And it was that extra endurance. It wasn't that my 400 meter sprint speed got any faster. My 800 meter, I never cracked 2 in the 800 meters, but I was able to run, 63 seconds per 400 for almost a mile. I also ran it's about a 4:15 mile equivalent. So 355 in the 1500, and that's a very anaerobic component, speed-based type of race. But I had the marathon training strength, and I was PRing in the 5K and 10K as well. So the aerobic training and the high mileage gives you strength. It allows you to pull out a higher fraction of your sprint speed, and that's the real key takeaway. And it's something that Arthur Lydiard, coaches like that, were preaching back in the 1960s, having their 1500 meter runners training like marathon runners, doing 22-mile hilly long runs, doing things like hill bounding, hill repeats, things like that in different stages of their training, the periodization. And then the icing on the top was the speed work and maybe some anaerobic component. We're talking about high lactate values going up to 100% max heart rate, high VO2 max types of things, high intensity intervals. But that comes later in the plan, and that's kind of the icing on the cake. It's a small fraction of the total training time and the total training volume, whereas most of it was easy aerobic pace. But, there could be some steady state, so to speak, or what we call up tempo in between, but you're not pushing hard every day. You're not trying to get out the door and hurt yourself. So, you got to stay healthy. You got to stay consistent. You don't want to sacrifice your sleep or, too much of your strength training. But I still think a lot of people think they need to go to the gym. They need to do all this yoga. They need to, do all this, and this. And maybe you do to stay healthy. That's real key. But if you could spend that time running an extra 3 or 4 miles a day or an extra 5K a day, maybe that's the thing that's going to allow you to pull out more of your speed and actually race up closer to your potential in long distance races, mainly 5K, half marathon, marathon, ultra marathon, stuff like that. But even as well at the 1500 and 1 mile races, it does come back to mileage and dedication. And final note on that, could be a little extreme, but my college coach, Rojo, Robert Johnson at Cornell, he used to tell us in the summer, if you're not running 90 minutes a day, you're not even training, which is not good advice for most people. That's a long time to be running, but we had 20 guys on the team running 100 miles a week, 160K a week in the summer. Some of them got hurt, some of them overtrained, but it was just kind of the idea of the aerobic-based development of, hey, I need to probably run twice a day. I need to run, 70 minutes here. Maybe I run another 40 minutes later in the day. Maybe I'm doing a 2-hour long run. There's all sorts of long durations there. And if you think of professional cyclists or triathletes, they're just pounding their aerobic system with a lot of moderate intensity, but long duration types of exercise. Pro cyclists, you have to be in the saddle 4, 5, 6 hours a day sometimes, just training, because that's the level that you could put out on a bike. In running, though, we cap it at a shorter time span. So, less time commitment, but got to stay healthy. Again, build that aerobic base. Check out my other talks on aerobic base building and how to sprinkle in higher intensity workouts later on, but stay healthy, keep having fun out there, keep it fresh mentally. Those are my key takeaways in this training talk. Comment below with future training talk topics that you would like to hear about on next week's training talk edition. Vote up ones that you'd like to hear about, and we'll go with the top voted one. Thank you again for all your support on here. Again, really, really appreciate it. Shout out to title sponsor Hoka. Keeping the dream alive. Again, check out our training plans at higherrunning.com. Follow us on social media at higherrunning. Coach Sandy and I sell training plans there for any surface, any distance. Thank you so much to all the Patreon supporters for really making this channel possible. Hope you're doing well, and stay tuned for more VO2 Max Productions.